Everything I learned about entrepreneurship, I learned by selling overpriced wrapping paper door to door, unsupervised when I was 7. In this video, we're deep diving into school fundraising in the 90s and 2000s because we were really put to work in the name of making money for the school, and we gotta talk about it. And it wasn't just wrapping paper we were selling. We were selling magazine subscriptions, coupon books, we were selling chocolates, we were selling cheese, citrus, poinsettias, cookie dough, pizza, and more. And not just that, but we were jump roping for the heart and for the cash. We were trekking for tech, i.e. walking laps around the track because we needed our parents to pay for new school computers. This video is broken up into the following chapters. Number 1, the selling stuff fundraisers. Number 2, the doing stuff fundraisers. Number 3, the assemblies, prize pyramids, and MLM of it all. Number 4, why schools need to do fundraisers. Number 5, the criticisms of school fundraisers and what some people would like to do instead. And lastly, how school fundraisers are different today than they were back then. So let's get started. And I would appreciate if you commented below with the decade that you were in school and what fundraiser you remember the most, because I'm fascinated to see if it's going to be brought up later in the video. Now let's talk about these selling stuff fundraisers, because this encompasses a lot of different items. And I want to start with the one that probably the most people will remember. Sally Foster wrapping paper and gifts. If you remember being told to go around with a catalog of wrapping paper and some other stuff to sell to your neighbors, parents, coaches, really anyone who would give you the time of day, that was either Sally Foster or Innisbrook, but Sally Foster was the larger of the two, so we're going to focus on her. Not her specifically, though she was a real person, but we're talking about the business and her a little bit as well. This company actually has kind of a nice story. I don't know if it's true, but this is what they put out there as the truth. So back in 2001, the Foster line was sold in over 8,000 schools across the nation, helping them fundraise, and there was an article I found about it in 2001. Schools would get roughly 40 to 50% of sales, and the catalogs, which started as only wrapping paper, would also have things like ribbons, gifts, chocolates, and other knickknacks. You'd sell it right before the Christmas holiday, so around fall. But in 2001, by the time the article was written, Sally Foster, the company, was over 30 years old. Sally Foster, the person, was also over 30 years old. She graduated from Duke University with a degree in psychology, and her husband, Philip Foster, was in the retail packaging business. This sounds like it's another chicken soup for the soul entry. Throwback to that video, but it's actually real, allegedly. Anyway, once they had kids, Sally wanted to earn money to go towards paying for the kids' summer camps to get them out of her hair. She did not say that last bit, I just added that part, but she did want to earn money for the kids going to camp. So she got creative and decided to try and essentially sell some of her husband's wrapping paper to local moms, essentially holding like wrapping paper parties at her house, similar to like a Pampered Chef party or something like that. It was a success, and she launched the official business in 1973, working with just 3 schools and selling only red or green gift wrap. The purpose of the company was always fundraising. Sally Foster was never just like a regular retail outlet. It always worked with schools and other nonprofits like churches for fundraising. Eventually, they started working with big wrapping paper manufacturers, and she took a lot of pride in creating the products and all of the different patterns, which we'll get to in a minute. The business was actually sold in 1989 to a man named Bill Moore for several $1 million, and the Fosters stayed on as consultants. Then it was sold again in 1992 for $31 million to Entertainment Publications, the maker of those coupon book things. In 2001, they launched sallyfoster.com, which allowed for online ordering so you could have access to a website, and the company would ship directly to the person who ordered, and then the credit could go to the school of your choice. Before that, and this is where it starts getting very 80s and 90s, you would have a paper catalog, though it was very high quality. So high quality that some people literally just enjoyed the booklet. Someone said, "Yes, we were poor in a poor neighborhood, so I never really sold anything. But my favorite part was the book you'd carry to sell the paper. It had pieces of paper in it, and I would play with that paper." LOL. Another way to spot a millennial. Anyway, someone else said, "I absolutely loved the pretty samples included too." And I'm not gonna lie, when I saw this picture that jogged my memory of what the catalogs used to look like, I too can say I was mesmerized by the samples and felt like I had just struck crafting gold, even though you could literally do nothing with the amount of paper. But the point was not just for us to play with the paper samples, it was to raise money for the school. And because technology was not quite so advanced in those days as to allow for fundraising websites, you were encouraged to basically go door to door bothering strangers to beg them to buy stuff. When they eventually, hopefully, caved and bought something, they'd give you the money and you would put them down on the order form. Then, when the products came in, you would bring your stuff home from school and deliver it directly to them yourself. I mean, your parents would probably be involved at some point too, but I have very distinct memories of being maybe 10 or 11 and being allowed to go door to door with no parental supervision. So yeah, on one hand in this decade, we had stranger danger and stories in the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. See, I can't stop mentioning them, about kids getting kidnapped. And then on the other hand, our mentors in school were like, hello, small child, your job is to go ask every stranger possible if they'd like to buy some gift wrap. I'm going to talk more about the prizes in chapter 3, but the incentive for the kids was not just that your school would get money, because honestly, when you're that young, you have no concept of money and you do not care, but you do have the concept of prizes. Namely, cheap junk that you were desperate to have, like a cool voice changer thing, or more expensive stuff like a Nintendo that you basically had to sell like thousands of dollars worth of products for. Someone said if you sold like $1 million of wrapping paper to your neighbors, the top prize was a limo ride with the principal and 6 friends to buy pizza at Domino's. But we will get there. I just need those of you to know this who didn't do school fundraisers so you would understand what got us motivated. Okay, so back to Sally Foster before we get on to the other stuff. The thing about Sally Foster was that she believed in creating a quality product, not just selling complete junk. Sally Foster wrapping paper was actually quality. The paper was 30% heavier than your normal wrapping paper, which meant that it stayed together and didn't rip as easily. And there's a post I found with people saying things like best wrapping paper and best fundraiser. Someone else says it was the best. She was also an upstanding woman. Someone else said Sally Foster was the best wrapping paper. I always purchased it during school sales. In 2009, someone named Laurel said on a forum, ugh, it's school fundraiser time. I need to order 2 to 3 items from Sally Foster. Any experience or recommendations? And someone else was like, Laurel, don't panic. Their wrapping paper is super nice. It seems to last forever. Our school sells it too, and I don't mind that it costs a bit more because I really like it. Also, side note, I did think, what if Sally Foster put all of these people on the internet to like guerrilla campaign for Sally Foster wrapping paper, but I don't think they did. I think these were real moms. Now, the wrapping paper cost about $7 to $10 a roll then, which was on par with other upscale wrapping paper at the time. And like I said, this was all part of Foster's plan. She knew that people didn't look forward to fundraisers and the pressure to ask people to buy stuff. So she, and I quote, figured that practical, quality products would encourage parents to buy it themselves. The article on Sally Foster fundraisers does end with a quote that said one little boy when he looked under the tree on Christmas morning, Mom, I didn't know Santa used Sally Foster. This is one of those things where you're like, that 100% did not happen. No child ever said that, but good creative writing. Also, there are still some people who have their Sally Foster wrapping paper because it survived all of these years, including this post I found very recently from a mayor of some town, and she had just used the last bit of her next to last roll of Sally Foster wrapping paper. And plenty of parents still have it in their closet somewhere because they bought so much and they just didn't have a use for it. Or maybe the kids grew out of the kid-centric patterns and you still had some left. Someone said, my godmother is still using the wrapping paper I sold her in 1988. Anyway, Innisbrook wrapping paper, as I mentioned, was very similar, but there's nothing else that we need to mention or that I could find here. I just wanted to throw it out there that if you remember that being your catalog brand of choice, if you for some reason remember this, you are not going crazy. Same exact concept. Now, the next item that was very popular to sell was chocolate and candies. 2 of the most popular brands, World's Finest Chocolate and Morley's Candy. Someone said, LOL. Again, we cannot stop using this, millennials. Me and my bro sold World's Finest Chocolate. We had sold a lot. We got our shipment, and before we could deliver, our younger sis ate all the chocolate, laughing emoji times 4. Most of the buyers were real nice about it, but my parents had to repay the rest. It was because of this that they didn't want to bother with the wrapping paper sales later on. Final LOL. There were 2 ways that you could sell chocolate depending on how your fundraiser did it. You were either given some chocolate bars to go out and sell that you already had in hand, or you had a brochure or took larger orders and then you got the shipment in. We did not personally sell chocolates at my school during my time there, so I don't have experience with this one, but if you did, please share with us your memories of chocolate selling and how many you ate versus sold. Then some people sold literal citrus fruit. Someone said, I think my chorus class in 7th grade did oranges to fund our trip because we were sick of the chocolate bars. Someone else said, our band program sold fruit every year. Mostly citrus fruit like grapefruit, oranges, etc. Pretty sure it all came from Florida. It was a huge deal in town. Everybody would ask, when is the band fruit happening? Then when the fruit came in, us band kids had to volunteer to go unload the fruit trucks. This is just getting weirder. And organize orders. There was a huge pickup drive-through, or you could take boxes you sold and go hand deliver. I personally grew up in Florida, so I have zero experience on this one either, but I can imagine if you're from like Wisconsin, a Florida orange might be a good fundraiser. Other mentions of selling stuff include Cherrydale Farms, Ivanhoe cheese, popcorn, poinsettias, and cookie dough, and pizza. Then there were magazine subscription sales, and this is where it gets ridiculous. And by ridiculous, I mean amazing in the most nostalgic way, because if you remember, you remember. And if you don't, it's still fascinating. Meet weepuls, also known as gleefs, warm fuzzies, or bippos, depending on your school, but the actual name is weepuls. They are what they look like, basically a pom-pom with googly eyes, and they were traditionally associated as prizes for the magazine subscription fundraisers, where you would get your family and neighbors to sign up for a new magazine subscription through you. Fun fact, Reader's Digest often counted for extra points or prizes. And we will talk more about the other prizes later, I promise. I know I've said that twice. We will get there. But weepuls are so tied into this specific fundraiser type that we've just got to talk about it now because kids were obsessed. Someone said the main prize we would get for selling them were basically the Labubus at the time. They were these little pom-pom fellas with eyes and different decorations like hats and sunglasses. You were cool if you had more of them and you could trade. Someone else said they were the ultimate status symbol of lower school. So now you not only have the fundraiser hype itself, but one of the very specific prizes became like a currency, making you cool and rich in status symbol if you had a bunch of them, which is hilarious in hindsight because they're about the dorkiest thing you've ever seen, but they were like gold. And the memories about these things are just so delightfully weird that I dove so deep into the weepul rabbit hole. Someone said, the guy that came to my elementary school would juggle apples and take a bite out of them as he did it. Everyone, I can't even talk. Everyone was so stoked for the Weeple Man Assembly twice a year. What? Truly, on one end of the spectrum, you have like upstanding citizen Sally Foster, who just wants to help schools raise money for field trips with her high-end wrapping paper. And then you have the Weeple Man. Like, imagine you're at career day in school and your teachers assess you and they're like, well, you're very good at juggling, so I can see you being a weeple man in your future. It's amazing. It's everything this channel is about, and I'm sad I didn't do a whole video on weepuls because I feel like I could have, but for now, we've got to keep going. Okay, last thing on the list, which is boring in comparison to weepuls, so we'll fly by it. It's the entertainment coupon books. This was another common fundraiser where it would be a book in your area with coupons for different retailers, which were supposed to be an easier sell because you could be like, buy this for 20 bucks, but you're gonna save 500 bucks worth of coupons. Really, typically it was a coupon to a place you'd never even go to in the first place, and you could get like 50% off if you came in on a Thursday at 10 a.m. and you ordered a taco and sushi if you had 8 people with you and it was raining. Okay, actually though, I do remember my mom using a lot of her entertainment coupon books. Wait, guys, sorry, I just sort of come up with things while I'm filming in real time, but we need a whole video about the couponing craze of our childhood. Okay, so little time, so much to do, which is another video idea. Shout out Niche, Mary, Kate, and Ashley fans. Okay, this is going off the rails. Anyway, chapter 2, the doing stuff fundraisers. I've got two major ones to talk about: jump rope for the heart / hoops for the heart, and trek for tech. Okay, so jump rope for heart and hoops for heart were both run by the American Heart Association, encouraging kids across the 80s, 90s, and 2000s to get more active and fundraise for the school as well as for the AHA. How it worked was basically you did jump roping in PE for some sort of like set lessons ahead of time. Maybe they got an exhibition jump rope team to get everyone excited, and what you would do as a kid is you would have an envelope for fundraising purposes where you would collect pledges, often for like how long you could jump rope for on the big day. So maybe people would pay like a certain amount per minute of jump roping. Then there would be the jump-a-thon day, where the whole school would take part in loads of jump roping and excitement and games, and there were t-shirts, and you'd collect the money from the people who sponsored you. And so you weren't selling stuff to fundraise, you were taking pledges, and it was supposed to go towards getting kids active, helping the school, and helping a good cause. So it was like win, win, jump rope, win. Hoops for Heart was extremely similar, except it was basketball themed, so it was all about making basketball shots. My school did hoops for heart rather than jump rope for heart, I think because our PE teacher was like 7 foot tall and really loved basketball. But people have some very funny memories about jump rope for heart, including someone who says, "That's how I met Arnold Schwarzenegger in 3rd grade at my elementary school in Cheyenne, Wyoming back in 91 or 92. LOL, there it is again. I still think about it today in my 40s. The whole school was in the gym jumping ropes for this event, and Arnold was up front. I like how they're on first name basis now. Arnold was up front leading everyone on how to do it. It was random and weird, but a core memory for me and probably the rest of the kids too." Now, I have no idea what Arnold was doing in Cheyenne, Wyoming in 1992, but I love this memory, and this is the kind of nostalgic stuff that gets me interested in these videos, because you think you're going to research for a section about jump rope for heart, and the next thing you know, Arnie is up on stage in someone's memory while they're jump roping, and it's just amazing. Now, someone else, and this does not directly relate, but in relation to being asked if they remember jump rope for the heart, they said, "I was too busy lying about reading books to cash in on those free personal pan pizzas myself." I don't even have a comment on this. I just thought it was very relatable for us people who were maybe book lovers and not so athletic. Now, some people also have bad memories of jump rope for heart, including someone who says this: "Our teachers lost their minds if you stopped jumping. A lot of kids ended up in detention because they couldn't keep up. It was not a good experience for my school." And that makes me sad, because for every Arnold Schwarzenegger visit, there's always someone who accidentally enrolled in Mrs. Trunchbull's jump for the heart class and they took it way too seriously. Or maybe the teachers just really needed those funds to go towards their school supplies, but there's always someone who has to ruin it. Some schools still do jump rope for heart, as I found comments saying their kids' schools did it as recently as 3 years ago, but it has mostly died off as standardized testing became more popular. Suddenly, like, school administration was like, we cannot justify all of this time for jump roping with Arnold Schwarzenegger when these kids need to pass this test, which I think is very sad, and possibly we could pinpoint the exact moment society started going downhill with the moment jump rope for the heart started declining. Don't quote me on that in an academic paper, but we all know there's something to it. Then there was something called Trek for Tech, which was a fundraiser used to get new tech supplies for schools, particularly in the era where computer labs were new and schools needed new funds and new budgets to provide all of it. My elementary school did this, and you were pledged for how many laps that you're going to walk around the track. I remember it being mostly fun, and you just chatted with friends. It wasn't like they kept you out there for 14 hours blowing whistles at you and making you walk until you had blisters. I'd be afraid to do it at that other person's school who complained their teachers got upset if they stopped jump roping, though, because probably someone somewhere is still doing laps around their school's track at the age of 40 because they're too afraid of their PE teacher to stop. People still do Trek for Tech style things, but on researching, I couldn't find like an organization that supported it. So even though there were t-shirts and stuff, I think it was a fundraising idea that a school would just take charge of. Like, they would call it Trek for Tech, but they would do it themselves. It's very rare for me to not be able to find some sort of nostalgic comment or information if it was a larger organization's. All I can find are individual schools all different logos saying Trek for Tech. I can't find something suggesting it came from one company, but if you know more, as always, comment below. Next up, let's actually talk about the prizes now, because how else are you going to get kids hyped up about selling stuff to random people if you don't give them some cheap junk in return that only kids would go for? How these fundraisers worked is that there were tiers or levels that you could reach based on how much you sold. They would often come with a prize catalog or flyer that told you all of the options. Very occasionally, it would be like an experience they could go to. Like the person who says they want a limo ride to play laser tag, which is actually cool compared to the weepuls. Sorry, weepuls fans. I can't get over it. But mostly it was winning stuff in exchange for selling stuff. But of course, most of it was just knickknacks and things that cost like 50 cents to make. But have you watched my Scholastic Book Fair video? Because as a child, you feel like you desperately need all of this. Like you need the voice recorder or the little rubber hand thing that you throw against the wall or the holographic notebook or whatever. Now, I've done some research on other people's experiences with the prizes themselves, so let's dive in. Someone said, I've sold wrapping paper, chocolate bars, popcorn, and who knows what else. It's kind of crazy to think I was 12 years old, walking around my neighborhood, knocking on random doors, trying to sell thousands of dollars of products so I can earn a $50 thing. And this is important to mention the obvious lack of return, which you really do not realize or care about at the time. There are people who did get good prizes, but they must have sold in like the tens of thousands of dollars of items. Like this guy who says, I was always the top in sales on these, and this is how I got my first Nintendo. I mean, okay, that is objectively awesome, getting a Nintendo as a prize for the fundraiser, but someone else says, we sold candy bars, and in the 4th grade, I sold so much I got a small black and white TV. I would eat after-school snacks and watch Star Trek: The Next Generation on it until one day I got curious what was inside, so I smashed the screen in with a rock. Okay, this one we have to unpack a little bit because on one hand, this kid was so entrepreneurial that they earned a TV, which could not have been easy. And then on the other hand, and I say this with a lot of love to this person, kids are so dumb that they'll smash their own prizes with a rock. Like, it all makes sense now how you can convince kids to do whatever the fundraiser was because their frontal lobe is very, very far from being developed and they're out there smashing their TVs with rocks and crying over weepuls. So yeah. Someone else said, yes, the infamous fundraiser where we have an assembly and they show all the cool prizes we can get if we sold a lot of stuff. It's so messed up for them to use children to sell overpriced items to our family. Keep the assembly portion in mind because we will get to that more in just a second. Someone else says, I remember them giving us this prize catalog thing of all these amazing things we could get if we reached certain tiers. I was psyched to get the shower radio thing that was probably actually worth like $5. But it was another one of those moments where you could tell who the rich families were because their parents would buy the most stupid wrapping paper so their kids got the top prizes and the poor kids got basically nothing. Now, before we talk more about the assemblies and the MLM of it all, let's talk about the side of it that was breeding future lovers of capitalism. And honestly, teaching us some business skills. That wasn't really the main intention. It was to earn money from the school, but some people got creative. One person said about selling chocolate bars, I set up across from a Weight Watchers and made my BS quota in a single day. Now, this is the kind of creativity and critical thinking that I'm going to put in the school fundraiser pro list. During my time living in another country, I was told that I had a knack for being able to sell anything, a concept, an idea, just convince someone of something. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Do I? And then I'm like, yeah, I do. Because I had to find a way to sell expensive wrapping paper to people who already had drawers of expensive wrapping paper that they wouldn't run out of for 20 years. So yeah, I do know what I'm doing. And clearly this chocolate seller did too, finding his target audience, and I cannot blame him. Someone else said, we sold $1 chocolate bars. Well, they did. I sold them for $2 each, or 2 for $3. Okay, you cannot be mad about this. This is American ingenuity at its finest, marking things up for profit so he could just pocket the rest and buy what he actually wanted. Genuinely, this is hilarious and also a little terrifying, but also amazing. What was also amazing to our little kid brains at the time was the assembly nature of the fundraisers, because you needed a sort of kickoff event. The teacher wasn't just gonna throw the catalogs at you during math class. And this is where the Weeble guy shows up and eats his apples. But really, it was how they hyped everyone up, like you're at some Tony Robbins event to sell whatever you're selling. This wasn't a boring product convention where they explained the benefits of the wrapping paper or why this was the best wrapping paper around or best chocolate around. Again, because we were like 10 and we did not care. All we cared about was that we could win stuff. And the way they presented it all and what we could win was very eerily similar to what you would think of as like an MLM hype meeting for adults. Someone's selling you this dream, but it wasn't to pay off our bills, it was to win a PlayStation. But the dream was very unlikely to come true for most people. And so the people at the top would profit, i.e. the fundraising company, and you would end up with a pom-pom ball with googly eyes. Also, people remembered a money wind tunnel as a prize, which is interesting for two reasons. If you don't know what a money wind tunnel is, I feel sorry for you, number one. Number two, it's basically this contraption that you step into that has dollar bills like swirling around. You can keep as many as you can pick up in like a 1 minute time period or however long they say. So again, to a kid, this is amazing, genuinely like beyond exciting. Except it also shows us again this connection to just pure unbridled capitalism, which capitalism is cool, but can we go too far with it? Were we better off holding community pizza parties and stuff like that to give prizes without literally putting children in tunnels of cash? But there's another sneaky part to it. These wind tunnels are notoriously almost impossible to grab anything other than $1 or $2 from. Obviously, if you could get rich from 1 minute in a cash wind tunnel, they wouldn't do them. And so these kids get sold the idea and the dream of making tons of money, which could be like $20 to a kid, but that's still a lot. And inevitably, they might walk away with maybe $1, maybe $2. Now, I do want to move on to the why schools need to do fundraisers chapter. Someone said, man, I think back on this stuff and get so mad. Like, we had to outsell everyone we knew with magazines and chocolates and wrapping paper. We had to buy boatloads of sugary cereal and cut the tops off. Wash cars all day, and there was always that one creep who would come back like 3 times. Other countries just fund their schools. Now, let me repeat that last part. Other countries just fund their schools. I've brought this topic up to people from other countries, particularly people from the UK, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm about to film a video about those school fundraisers where you would like sell wrapping paper and chocolate and win prizes. And they just look at me like, what in the world are you talking about? Why weren't you all in class? So, okay, the first bit to say is that in the US, school funding is basically a mix of about 10% federal government, 30 to 40% state government, and about 50 to 60% local government funding, with most of that funding coming from local property taxes. This makes school funding in America incredibly regional. You can have very well-funded public schools in wealthier districts and very underfunded public schools in districts that aren't as well off. There are also other things like funding schools based on how well students do on standardized tests, and as we all know, probably the more resources a school has, the better its students do on standardized tests, creating this sort of cycle. But this is not a video about school funding. This is a video about weepuls. I just want to point out that in the US, we do have a system where schools may need more money than they're allocated in order to give their students what they feel the students need. So like we talked about in the Scholastic Book Fair video, a lot of school librarians really depended on hosting the Scholastic Book Fair in order to earn books and resources for their students that they felt the students needed or at least deserved. The point of doing these fundraisers was not so that the principal could go on a long vacation to Hawaii. Like, this is not Congress, this is the PTA. These fundraisers were often having the money go back into things like field trips or funding the roles for certain staff within the school to help students, like extra support staff in the cafeteria or aides for students who needed extra help. And in the next section, we are going to talk about the cons of school fundraisers and people who disagree with what I'm about to say. But given that each individual school cannot change the whole school funding system and how it works, they have to operate within that. I don't see anything wrong with school fundraisers, even though the assemblies and getting little return for your work are a little bit cringy and unfair. The problem is this. There are, of course, some parents, like we'll learn about in the next section, who are more than willing to just write a check to the school for the money they need. And bless those parents. However, the reason the entire fundraising schemes exist is because it's not that easy to just convince people to donate cold, hard cash or money in any form. It's going to be far more effective to sell cookie dough or people feel like they're getting something than to just ask for money outright. And the people asking you to buy that wrapping paper or chocolate or cookie dough or whatever, if it's going to be an effective fundraiser, it's got to be the kids, because no one is going to buy wrapping paper they don't need from their 34-year-old next door neighbor named Joe who teaches 4th grade. They're going to be like, Joe, come on, figure it out yourself. I'm not buying anything from you. But when little Sally Foster herself, who's 9 and is in Joe's class, comes asking you, you bet you're going to be buying some wrapping paper and you're going to have a smile on your face the whole time you do it. Now, again, there are mixed opinions, and we're going to move on to the next chapter, which is the cons of school fundraising and people's criticisms of it. As one person put it, it seemed so exciting at the time, but why were the kids in charge of fundraising? Which we sort of just answered, but other people chime in with things like, I have no idea how they had all of us out there selling this crap. What a waste of time. If they tried promoting this kind of garbage with the kids in my school, we're going to be having an important lesson in MLMs and the art of telling people no. Someone else said practically free labor was really popular back in the 90s. And finally, these companies were using children to pitch and sell a product without paying them a wage, disguising it as a fundraiser to implement it across school systems nationwide was a genius move. So here's the other side of the coin, that a fundraiser is like a bake sale or like a community event, something more local that you can hold within your community, maybe like a dance-a-thon or like a lock-in or something where all of the proceeds go directly to the school. But instead, companies have stepped in to sell their products with the help of school children, which is seedy on the company's part. Then you have the schools that take it too far, with this sad story about a girl who was really upset by her teacher who was making her feel like she was in trouble for not selling stuff. She says, my teacher started asking me daily about my orders and would take my agenda and write in it about them. She told me she was disappointed and I had no school spirit. This made me upset. I was a sensitive kid and didn't misbehave, so I didn't know why I was in trouble. My parents went to a meeting with the school about it, and she never spoke to me about it again. You also have the situation again where the kids who come from wealthier backgrounds are going to succeed in selling more simply because the people around them, parents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, have more disposable income. Thus, they're going to be the ones getting the higher prizes, while the kids from lower income backgrounds don't have the same opportunity and have a much more difficult time reaching these goals. And then you've just got the quiet and shy kids who aren't going to succeed at the fundraiser because they don't want to go around to ask adults to buy things. And then they're being harassed by their teachers for not doing so when it's not really an educational component of elementary school. Maybe if you're 19 and taking a marketing class, but not when you're 8 and just want to read your Junie B. Jones book on the playground. But then, on top of this, we have another problem. So you've got the parents who are wise to the, well, I can just donate $10 to the school instead of paying $20 for cheese that I don't need because the school only gets a portion of the profit. So that's great for them. This one lady figured out the key, and it's a bit long, but I'll share what she said in its entirety. I learned that the average child who participated sold less than $150 worth of wrapping paper, and then the school only saw roughly 30% of that money back, about $45. They were asking kids to spend all their time hawking paper to all their relatives for $45. I told the lady that I'd propose a deal. We're not fundraising, but I'd send her double the average net proceeds in cash instead, and they had to count it towards my child's class's raised total for any of the perks from being a good fundraiser. They had things like the best class got pajama day, etc. She took the deal. We didn't even try to sell a single scrap of crap, and my kids' class got a pizza party for being one of the top classes for fundraising. So, yeah, you absolutely can buy out a fundraising without penalizing your child if they have perks. Just talk to the person in charge of the thing. For me, spending hours of my time helping my daughter for the school to get $45 off of $150 spent was trash. I'd rather just give them $100. Okay, cut back to me. So this lady she's wheeling and dealing with the fundraiser lady. Her kids don't have to sell the stuff and they still get to participate in the events. But this isn't always the case. This person says, my mom forbid me from doing any of this crap and would just donate whatever she would have spent to the PTA. Of course, I commend her actions now, but as a kid, it really sucked. I never got to go to the pizza party or get the free Frisbee or whatever. This mom didn't know the art of the deal, so her kid never got to go to the prize events or the party for selling anything. So yeah, the mom feels good about herself, but the kid now feels left out, which is an awful thing to feel at any age, but particularly when you're young. Other people talk about how their parents made them just give the fundraising book back to the teacher or whatever, which again probably makes the parent feel like they've won somehow against big fundraiser. But we've now involved the children again. There is nothing worse than when you're little than being made to feel like an outsider, even if being an outsider means you aren't going door to door selling snowman figurines to your neighbors so you can win a voice transformer that will break in 2 days. So the whole thing gets extremely complicated, hence why some people fall on the side of being against fundraisers like these altogether, and I would be totally happy to hear your opinions. But let's finish with the state of school fundraisers today, because they're still a thing. Schools need money. This is another nostalgic memory, like the Scholastic Book Fair, that will be nostalgic for future generations because schools still need extra ways to bring money in. Except there are a few differences. Firstly, as someone helpfully shares, now my school-age nieces and nephews just text me or email me links to donate money to various school things. So we've got the online format nowadays versus needing forms, which makes it way easier to spread the word or do things like GoFundMes or similar, where a school can just create like a goal that they want to raise money for. So they could say like, we need money to go to the science center, put it out there, and hopefully people donate without doing anything else besides asking for the money, because now it's going towards a specific cause. But schools do still regular selling stuff fundraisers like we used to do. A company called Charleston Wrap is the new Sally Foster, and in fact they have excellent SEO because you get directed to their site when you look up things like Sally Foster fundraisers, and they have an article about like, what happened to Sally Foster? It no longer exists, but oh well. You have us. It is far less common now to do the selling stuff type of fundraiser because of the lower profit margins. So more schools these days are doing things like readathons or coming up with their own type of fundraisers, so all of the money can go back to the school instead of splitting it with the company. And these tend to be the much more heartwarming community fundraisers that more people can get behind. But yes, Charleston Wrap and other companies like that do exist, and they also have prizes. I checked out their 2025 prize brochure, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to sell 5 items so I could win a bounce wizard. Some things never change. Now that brings me to the end of this deep dive. Please leave any and all comments about school fundraisers below. I really look forward to reading them all and learning about your school fundraising experience. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.